Yo guys, in this video I'm going to expose true plugin development. Now in my past video I forgot that the audio wasn't linked, so in this video you guys will hear the audio. So Ave Mcree put me onto a new tool today that I just saw, and it's called Hollow FX. So I want to thank Ave Mcree for even exposing me to this concept. I didn't know this existed. But before we get to this concept, let's talk about stuff that did exist so that you guys understand. So for example, FL Studio's Patcher is basically a signal flow machine where we can build different pathways for our audio and custom make a unique workflow. So let me show you guys. All right, guys, so consider this like level 1, for example, because the only thing about Patcher is that you can't export this as a plugin. You can save it where people can load it up in FL Studio, but you can't export it as a VST or an AU. So for example, I have a loop here and it's going through channel 1. Now, if I turn off Patcher, I will hear the audio. If I turn Patcher on, I won't hear audio because I haven't connected the cables. So it will mute by default. So if you want audio, you grab it from here, FL Studio's output, back into the input, and then you can hear stuff. So basically Patcher is about routing in a very complex way, or it can be complex, whether simple or complex. We're gonna route the signal in different places. So for example, let's say I want to create, my favorite one to mess with is the Fruity Delay 3. This does way more than delay. Okay, a lot of people think this is only delay. But what we're gonna do is, I'm gonna move a little bit quicker here, guys. We're gonna turn off tempo sync, turn it to 0. We're gonna turn the dry level down, and we're gonna turn feedback down. And now we're gonna duplicate the signal by sending the signal from the output back to the input. So now we have one that's delayed and one that is not delayed. Okay, now what we can do is cool stuff with the delay to create a smeary vibe over top of the original signal. So I'm just gonna turn knobs until we get into a vibe here. Now the cool thing about Patcher is you can right click any of these knobs and activate these to be modulated. Similar to my video where I said, in order for somebody to modulate our free will, we have to, comply and allow them to. Well, any parameter in FL Studio, we have to basically request for it to be modulated. So let's right click, hit activate on both of these parameters, and we should see little red dots next to the inputs here. And in the top left of FL, it will tell you what those names are. So it says delay time, right, left, offset, and this is feedback level. So now I can right click in here and add different modulation sources. The most common is your Fruity formula controller. This video is not a tutorial. I'm just showing you guys how this stuff is used. And then we have one, I always forget the name. So let me find it, guys, hold on. Okay, I always forget the name, but it's under generators, and go to Fruity envelope controller. There's so many names of things that control stuff I forget. So basically we can right click here, go to outputs, and we need to create an output. So we're gonna go to articulator 1 or envelope 1. And we're gonna go to articulator 1, which is this whole envelope here. And then we're just gonna give it a value. So we can give it continuous output. And let's give it like a little decay curvature, something like this. Now, I wish the grid was a little more simple. Let's put this on tempo so it kind of makes more sense in a way. I think this is 2 bars, if I'm not mistaken, or 2 beats, one of the two. All right. And then we're gonna go to the drop down, and I wanna go to, say, we can also do mod X mapping, which gives you a different curvature, but let's do envelope for now. Okay, and then let's grab this envelope and drag it over each of those parameters. So now it should control those knobs. Let me see if those knobs are moving. If not, we're gonna use them. Yeah, okay, so let's switch this over to mod X. All right. Again, it's been a minute since I used this, guys. So now you guys can see these values change. Okay. Now another way we can modulate this, and it needs an input from the MIDI. I forget how to set this up, so it's not a step-by-step tutorial, guys. I'm just showing you guys stuff. So let's delete this, and then we're gonna modulate it instead by Fruity formula controller. So this is the one where we're gonna give it an LFO type shape that will keep repeating. So here we have to right click, go to controllers on the output, and go to output, and then drag this over these 2 dots. So this will have a continuous movement to it, and then we can change this. So let's get a sine wave going. We can go to preset, go to LFO, go to basic sine wave. Whoa, and then we can select the max value. So let's pull in the range here for B, because right now it's controlling the feedback as well. So the feedback, that's why we heard that resonance. And then we can set the speed, the bass level. Let's lower the bass level so we don't crank up the feedback as much. And then we can crank up the speed or slow down the speed. And I could say, okay, let's say we don't want those two to be modulated. We can go back in here, right click another parameter and just simply disconnect cables and then, you know, modulate other cables. So this is a modular approach to creating a sound manipulating thing. So now I'm controlling the delay time here. Let's just pull the range in. Now this is where, you know, I would have to give you guys a tutorial on how to set max ranges using those fruity envelopes. And that's what it's initially built for, but I forgot how to do all that, you guys. All right, so I figured out how to use the fruity envelope controller. I just remembered how we use this. So basically we're using the fruity formula controller to give it a shape, but then we're giving a specific range. So for example, in the fruity delay, when we turn up the time too long, it just has this warbly sound. It just sounds kind of all over the place. So what we're doing with the fruity envelope controller is clicking this drop down, go to continuous output, switch it to mod X mapping. And this is essentially the range from 0 to 100. We're saying what value does it output? So even though the input, for example, is going from the fruity controller, we're going to right click here, go to controller and go to, how do I do the outputs? I forgot that fast. Output. Basically I drive this node and I dragged it into the fruity envelope controller. And then when you do this, it asks you what you want to modulate, and we're going to go to global modulation X. Okay. And that's basically the envelope with the mod X mapping. And again, it's allowing to have input from 0 to 100, but it's allowing us to warp the output range. So instead of the output saying 0 to 100, it might say 0 to 20 or 0 to 30, whatever we make this. Okay. So this is now going to control the fruity time delay time. So now it's not as aggressive on the sound. So these are the types of things you can do with, you know, Patcher. Not to make this a whole tutorial, but I had to show you guys something that was working so that you understood the importance of this, because this is not a plugin you can get inside of FL Studio. This is a custom made thing. And then we can even go deeper, which is to add another plugin in here. And just by right clicking to insert a plugin, let's add another Fruity Delay 3. Now this Fruity Delay 3 is going to be a simple time delay. So we're going to add Fruity Delay 3 and we're going to turn the wet level all the way up, feedback down, delay time, tempo sync off, turn it down. And basically we're going to move the time knob and keep this constant so it offsets that smeary tone from the original signal. We can increase this. Or we can even have this adjustable via some knob. So for example, I can right click and activate this and I can create an interface. So I'm showing you guys kind of, you know, the beginner levels of this stuff to show you guys how far you guys can take this stuff. So now on the surface, again, this is not a tutorial. We're going to insert a knob here. Let's just do a default knob. And this knob will control the delay time. But what we have to do now that we've added the knob on the surface is grab this little red dot and then have it control the thing that we activated in Fruity Delay 3, this one, which was to control the time delay. So I'm going to rename this time delay, whereas this one's actually doing some kind of chorus effect. Okay, so now when I move the knob on this surface, if I take off this little wrench tool, it will move that knob. Let me see if there's a way I could show you guys as we do this. I think we could do it this way. Yeah, so watch the time move as this knob moves. And we can also control this knob can control multiple things at once. It doesn't have to control one thing at a time. So now I can dial in based on my song the exact time I want. So now we have a what do you call this? A chorus delay that you can't get in FL Studio. Let's add a couple more features like feedback. Now we can create like an analog vibe. Let's even bandpass the response here. So it sounds like a spring reverb. And now we have a custom effect. And this is just the bare surface, guys. This isn't even going too deep into Patcher like that. So I'm saying all this to say, that is one way producers are developing their own sound. So that same thought process can be applied to other systems, like for example, Max for Live. Now this one, I'm not going to demo because it just would take too long. But basically I've created a drum processor, and this is what the interface looks like when you drag it into Ableton. But if you open up the back end, this is the same kind of modular approach, which is I'm just grabbing nodes that do stuff and moving them around. And the interface controls all this back end stuff. So that's essentially the same type of process. Now, Max for Live can get really deep and very complex. This is not a tutorial at all about Max for Live. I just want to show you guys there's tools that we've had for years on how to build plugins. It was just very hard to convert this idea into an actual VST or an AU. Whereas Max for Live, I think you need this thing called Rainbow, if I'm not mistaken, to convert Max for Live devices over to actual plugins. But most people they use Max for Live inside of Ableton, so they don't worry about actually shipping a VST or an AU. So with all those systems being said, I know that was a long start to the video, but I had to give you guys context. So now we're going to move into a system that I mentioned before called Highs. And when I was building this before, you guys couldn't hear anything because I forgot to make sure the audio was routed to the recorder. But now here's the plugin we built in version 1 of the video. Let me make sure I'm playing this and not FL. All right, so here's a loop we brought into Highs just to test our chorus effect. And if we change any parameters on the front interface here, it will change the sound. Okay, so it's the same concept as Patcher. And I showed you guys how we built this using script, for example, script effects and a delay in a chorus. The point of the video I was trying to make is that a lot of plugins you guys consume are basically just the same DSP, meaning the same effects reskinned. Okay, so I was making the argument because people kept saying my plugin was AI generated and all this type of stuff, and I leveraged AI to make something unique DSP. Okay, a lot of people are tricking you guys, giving you guys the same basic effects under the hood with a different UI. And it's like, to me, that doesn't really, like, I'm not telling you guys what to do because you have to start somewhere. But we have to realize that the UI means the graphic interface. So the UI, you guys got to realize, like, I blind tested plugins and you guys can be tricked by the UI. Just because it looks neat and pretty doesn't mean that it sounds better. Okay, so anyhow, here is the chorus module. We were modulating some of these knobs here, and then we did some delay stuff that we modulated. And then we did some custom script effects here where I think we did this like tan function, which was creating like a clipping sound, and then we created a compressor into a phaser. So I might start from scratch to show you guys how this system works. But this system is basically a system that Chris built over top of what's called Juice. So Juice is behind some of your favorite plugins. Like I think Nexus is on that list, if I'm not mistaken. But a lot of the top companies use Juice because when you code from scratch, it's like building a house from scratch. It's like, do I have to build every material from scratch, or do house builders go to places that have the materials built and then they put the materials together? So that's kind of how we approach plugin development, is we go to the companies that have the drywall and the rock wool and all that stuff created prior, and then we just put the stuff together. Now we are building a unique house, however. So whereas some of the systems that you guys may find, it's almost like pre-made rooms. Like, do you want a room here, room there, swimming pool here or there? So it's kind of like pre-made rooms, whereas we're going to the level of building the custom house from the ground materials. So all this to be said, we're going to start from scratch just to show you guys how to use Highs. Now Highs, again, is a framework that sits on top of another framework called Juice. Okay, so it's a custom workflow system that sits on top of Juice, and Juice is an abstraction of what's called C++ for the most part. So I'm trying not to teach you guys too much about technology because I'm not an expert. My point is that these are derivative systems. Okay, so C++ is the raw code, then it's Juice, okay, the framework that organizes the raw code, then it's Highs on top of that, which organizes the things that people find most important to make it a simple workflow, because because Juice doesn't have a simple interface like this. Okay, so let's start from scratch. So let's say you guys are building your first plugin. And again, if you guys want to learn from an actual pro, Pirate taught me basically everything I needed to know about Highs. Let me find his website. So the person who I thought I had to gatekeep the stuff he taught me is now teaching folks. And I can tell you that this guy truly wants to see you guys succeed, because he helped me when he didn't have to. And that is extremely rare in this plugin development space. I can tell you that's extremely rare. So I trust him 100%. Just go to audiotechhub.com. And like I said, this is pennies, y'all. I've consulted with him, and I can tell you guys, he charges a hefty fee. So the fact that you guys can get in for this price is like nothing. It's basically nothing. And the fact that you guys can build plugins, like, come on, it's a no-brainer. So let me show you guys the Highs system. So Highs, in short, is a place where you can create a user interface on top of the back end effect. So today we're just going to focus on an effect plugin to keep it simple. Now the first thing we need to do is load up audio so that we can test our effect. So I'm going to click here and load up. I always forget where this stuff is. Oh yeah, audio loop player. Now this is not to be shipped with the plugin. I'm just loading this up so that we have audio that we can pass through the plugin to hear its effect. So for those with MIDI controllers, you have to go up to highs, click where it says file, go to settings, click where it says audio and MIDI, turn on your MIDI controller so that you can play your actual notes, especially if you guys are building out synth plugins. All right, so now we have an Ado loop. Shout out to Drew from Ado Sounds. So we're using this loop so that we can test our effect. All right, so that is just an audio player for us to test stuff. Now what we can do is click where it says FX, and we can add any effects we want. Now, from what I understand, it works from top to bottom in terms of signal flow. So let's first add a delay. Okay, and then on the front panel, we can create knobs to control different things. So the first thing I want to control is the mix level, and maybe let's do like, I don't know, left, right timing. So let's create 3 knobs here. So to go to the interface, you click on this interface thing. And again, this is not a tutorial, guys. I'm just trying to show you how we build plugins, okay? And I've done many plugins through the Hi system. I don't use Hi's anymore. I go directly to the Juice code and C++ and even Rust code directly. So I don't use this system necessarily, but I think this is a good system for you guys to learn how this stuff works and how deep the rabbit hole goes. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This video is definitely not going to be about UI development. I will show you guys a website where you guys can get some assets, but in terms of UI development, that is a whole different beast. And most people use what's called Figma, and I am not an expert at all at Figma. Okay, so we're gonna right click here. We're gonna go to where it says slider, if I'm not mistaken. I forgot kind of all the names of stuff. So here we're gonna call this delay mix, and you have to click out for the name to refresh. So then we have to tell it, okay, what do we want to control? Let's say processor ID, delay number 1, which is our effect right here called delay 1. And then we're going to tell it to control the mix parameter. So basically we're just linking a knob to a parameter. That's all plugins really are. When you understand Juice, like it's just a bunch of sliders and just on and off buttons. But UI is what makes it look more organized and like a plugin. But really it's just a bunch of parameters that you control. That's basically what a plugin is. All right, but let's add 3 more knobs in here. And again, this is not a tutorial. If you guys want a tutorial, go to Pirate's course, okay? Let's type in, what was it? Delay right time. Forgot the parameter we wanted here. Go to processor ID, delay, parameter, time right. Okay, and then let's do the same thing here. I think Command D duplicates. All we're gonna do here is change the word right to left and change the parameter to the left time. So now I have 3 knobs that control the delay. So if I hit play on my sound and then I start moving these knobs, sound changes. Okay, that's basically what a plugin is, guys. Now the only thing that's missing here is the interface, which I think by default this is 600 by 600 if I'm not mistaken. I forget how to see the code screen. Yeah, so it's 600 pixels by 600 pixels. So I'll show you guys how to create a simple interface. But okay, so now let's make this even more complex. Let's go to effects and let's add some reverb, for example. I think they have a reverb, if I'm not mistaken. Do they have reverb in here? Maybe I'm tripping. I thought they had reverb. Oh, simple reverb. Okay. So here's a simple reverb, and let's say all we want to control is the wet level for the reverb. So let's click that little pencil tool, make another slider. See how simple this is? It's like you guys have been doing this forever. It's just in a different format, so it looks more complicated. Let's go to simple reverb, and then go to where it says the wet level of the reverb, so the amount of the reverb, and then now we can turn up the reverb just like that. Now, again, I could tell you a handful of plugins that are literally just these knobs with a user interface, and they're charging like whatever for the plugin. I'm not saying people can't charge what they want. My point is we tend to get deceived by user interfaces, and we think that under the hood it's so complex. Like it's really not that complex. That could be a good or a bad thing. I'm not trying to trash people. And then let's add a saturator here. And let's see what we can add in here. Let's see what saturation sounds like. So this, we're just gonna turn up the saturation, which is most likely a tan function for those who understand what that is. All right, so saturation, and then I'll show you guys how to create a custom chain and then how to create an interface. So it's saturation, wet level, which is the amount, or no, not the wet level. We want the saturation amount, actually. Wrong parameter. So you guys got to make sure you're choosing the right parameter. And now we'll thicken out the sound to make it more full. All right, so we have pretty dope parameters that create a unique sound. Now we're going to move into something called the script effects. Now this requires tutorials, because the hardest part about highs, in my opinion, is installing it. That is one of the most complicated processes, just getting highs up and running. Okay, it's like you're performing a ritual. Okay, so let's go here to create a new file. This is called DSP network, and this is already built for us, I guess, because we're in the same project folder. So let me see if I can get rid of that one, start brand new. Let's do this, and if it doesn't work the way I expect, we'll just use that one. So let's do script effects. I'm trying to start brand new here. Let's call it 2. Let's call it a different name. Maybe that's why. Okay, so in here, this is basically Patcher, just in a very simplistic visual. So, and also let me make sure you guys can hear the audio. Hopefully that record. Okay, cool. Just double checking, because last time I didn't record the audio, so I'm just talking and explaining stuff and you guys can't even hear it. Okay, so here is basically Patcher. The same way, again, in Patcher, let me see if I still have it open. You had the input and output. Like if I start from scratch on Patcher, all it was really is just an input to an output. Okay, so this is essentially the same thing. It's just input up top, output at the bottom. That's what these cables represent. Now in between, we could add a bunch of stuff, and you can create different, nodes or directions, whatever, different forks, okay, for the signal. So here, let's say we want a tan function, which is basically saturation or clipping. All right. And if I turn this up, it adds more and more of that saturated tone. And let's say to control the saturation after that, we want to add some kind of compression. So I think there's a built-in compressor in here, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so let's add a dynamics compressor. Now the interface is going to look very different than your typical stuff. So you have to get used to just the names and the nomenclature of this stuff. Now let's add a compressor in here. Let's turn the ratio to 2 to 1. Let's do 4 to 1. And now it's being compressed once it goes above a certain amount. And let's say, what else do we want here? Let's add some kind of phase offset. Let's call it phase delay. And another thing about this process in highs is that you're going to the meta layer. So you guys are used to Fruity Delay 3 and all these plugins kind of having stuff built for you. Here you have to build the concept of a delay, like with the meta layers of like what phase is and all this type of stuff. So it does require a little knowledge. But again, when you guys just experiment, I think you guys will find something unique. So what we can do is create a knob, a macro, and this knob will go on the front panel. So let's call this custom effect. And this knob can control different things. So let's have it control the phase frequency and maybe I want to do the tan function, but it seems to be a volume knob basically. So I'm trying to debate how we're going to do this. So we need, I didn't set this up right. I should have done like a split signal, and I forget. I think they call these templates. So templates will allow you to have different things, like for example, a dry wet pathway, so that you could turn all the effects on and off without messing with the curvature. You could do mid side. So there's different presets for that, and I should have set that up first before I started building this out. But long story short, in this case, we should have gone with the dry wet chain. And then you're gonna have to drag the effects into that chain. So for the wet, we're just gonna drag that in. The compressor, drag it underneath the tan function. Phase delay, drag that underneath. And I think everything else needs to be where it is from what I understand. All right, now we can tell this knob, I forgot how to make this not control. I think it's either right click. No, let me figure this out. It's either control click or right click, hold on. Okay, so you basically have to like drag this over something and then find the parameter, and this little, when it highlights red, double click and I will get rid of the curvature. So anyway, we're going to drag this over the dry wet mix knob, and we should have a knob called custom effects. Okay, if we did this right. Let's go back to the interface, and now we got to create a slider or a knob, and then this one's going to be called custom effects. And then I'll show you guys how to make a simple user interface, and then I'll show you guys where we used to get the graphical assets for the interface. So let's go to, where's it at? Script effects, because then it's going by the name here, not the name of the actual knob. So script effects, and then we have to find the parameter called the custom effects. And this should control the wet level or the blend knob, if I did this right. Okay, so it doesn't have that much of a different sound, but again, like I said, you guys can make the script effects more complicated. So there's a gazillion things you could do in here. Left, right panning, there's a billion things. Okay, I just gave you guys the gist of the gist. Okay, let's go back to the interface. So this is the, this is the bare bones of what the plugin is. And again, like I said, guys, this is not a tutorial, because in the tutorial I would have to give you the how-to about how to make these knobs look more professional. But let me show you guys a website where you guys can find graphical assets. So the company is called uimother.com. This site is basically built for people who are trying to build their own plugins and just don't have a graphics team. They basically create stuff for you guys. So they have stuff that looks kind of like Omnisphere on here. This one looks kind of dope. Let me see. That's like a retro synth. I think we even used something like this for our Vintage Fire, for those who remember that plugin. This one reminds me of my Hermes plugin, very similar to my Hermes plugin actually, which is dope. Let's see what else. This looks like a Nord. I'm trying to think what this stuff looks like. All right, so they have a ton of presets. So basically you're gonna buy these assets and load up different, I think they call them sprites. Yeah, sprites of like 129 slot. Here's the Omnisphere one, by the way. And I'm not sure if they still sell the components. Okay, so they sell faders. So if you just want a fader for your interface, you could just buy the faders. If you just want knobs, I think they sell knobs as well. So again, it just depends. Oh, here's the one we use for Vintage Fire. This is called Vintage Synth. Funny enough, it's called Vintage Synth. And then this is the one I use for Hercules here, for my old plugin called Hercules. We now, moved our plugin over to our sampler, but I'm just showing you guys like the stuff I would use. So here's the one I bought. It was only $9. Wow, I didn't realize that. But here's the Hercules one. I went to Photoshop. I changed the name Neptune to Hercules, and I moved some stuff around. But what they're showing you in this picture is just a demonstration of the assets. You can rearrange these however you guys want. Okay, so again, this is not a tutorial because I really have to explain so much about a lot. But basically, what these knobs are, when you turn a knob, is 129 frames of just an image turning. So imagine 100 pictures in slow motion of somebody moving. That's basically what it is. So when you turn a knob, it's just picking a different picture, okay, per that specific frame. So most sprites are 129 frames. And again, like guys, this is not a tutorial. But you have to set the amount of frames, like the number of strips they call it. That would be 129 for this specific company. And like I said, there's tutorials out there. Go to Pirate. He can guide you guys step by step. I'm giving you guys the rough overview. But let's say you guys don't have money for all this and you just want to generate. So let me show you guys a ghetto way to make an interface real quick. We're going to generate this on ChatGPT. We're going to give it very specific instructions. All right, so now we're in ChatGPT. Personally, I think ChatGPT and OpenAI have the best image generation tool in the AI market. I love the time this saves me. I can't tell you guys how many hours I've wasted in Photoshop just making poor designs. And I just had to say, okay, I'm not, super dope designer that can just start from scratch. So here we're going to use ChatGPT. So anyway, we'll say create a 600 by 600, and then we'll say user interface for a VST plugin. We got to be very specific because we have to tell it not to just do too much. We need it to have textures and no main objects, I guess is the keyword. No main objects, just background texture of a vintage, outboard analog piece of gear. Hopefully this even understands what I'm saying. Okay. And then I'll see how many knobs we have to apply to it. 6 knobs. We have 6 knobs that I need to apply to the interface. I don't know how else to explain to it. So we're just going to tell it to create an image, and then we're just going to have to wait for it to generate. So I'll pause the video as this generates. All right, now luckily with ChatGPT, it knows how to remove things. So here it just added its own knobs with values that we didn't ask for. But I did say give it 6 knobs. I said we have 6 knobs. So like I said, I wasn't clear that what I would do with the knobs. So it does look like vintage, not really the style I was going for. So another way to kind of help this thing understand is to give it a reference image. So Nexus 2 is one of the greatest interfaces in my opinion of all time, next to Omnisphere. So let's do Nexus 2 and we'll say create an interface that is polished like this, just remove all knobs and knob values, because even the knobs itself, I'm trying not to explain everything, guys, but like I said, on the UI Mother website, you can buy just the knob. So when you turn the knob has different shadings. But the thing is, usually when you're creating an interface background, you hard boil in these like knob values. Okay, so that's something that you do create in your Photoshop file or Figma file as the knob values, but then you implant the knob sprite over top of that. So it looks like it's one thing, but it's really two things. So basically we have to tell OpenAI that we don't want the values like where it says 3, 10, or 30, and we don't want the knob either. Okay, and then we want a more modern, let's go more modern, polish, less vintage, because vintage looks like worn down, it looks tacky. Okay, so create an interface. All right, and hopefully it understands the mission here. If it doesn't, you guys get the gist. Okay, so I'll just show you guys how to import this one, even with the knobs. Let me just show you how to do this real quick. We're going to download this. And now we need to go back into Highs and go to the edit tool, right click, and then go to where it says add new image. All right, and then basically, I forget how this is ranked. It's been a minute, y'all. So I think anything at the bottom of the stack where it says all these numbers, where it says knob 2, 1, 3, anything at the bottom is basically underneath everything from what I remember. So now we need to give this an image file. So right now it's just missing the file. So we're going to click on the image. It says missing, and we need to go to where it says file name open, and then we can find it in our downloads folder. So here's one. I might even use this one just to see what it looks like. So this is a whole different picture I created for my album. Let's just see if this fits. It is 1 by 1, but it's not. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so we can use something like that. This looks more clean. And from what I remember, okay, so I was wrong. So anything on the bottom is at the top, so it's in reverse. So we have to put the image at the bottom, and then what we have to do here is lock the layer so that we don't move it around by accident. Even though I just did it just then. How did that work? Okay, so I guess you can move locked things. Okay, so that's locked. Shouldn't be able to move it around. I don't know why it's letting me move it around. So again, like I said, guys, it's been a minute since I used Highs. Let's just get out the edit mode. And now we have the knobs. Okay, so I can move these knobs anywhere. So let's say we do something like this. Boom. And now we're just creating an interface. Now, again, the only thing that makes this look, I'll say, tacky is just the default knobs. So again, these knobs can be replaced with industry knobs, but I'm not going to sit here and buy a kit just to show you guys this. If I do find actually, here's what I'll do. I'll take the time to actually see if I can find the source file. All right, well, let's see what ChatGPT has created so far. So this is a pretty decent UI, not too bad, not too shabby. All right, so again, this is where it just takes time, guys. There's no like magical thing. I'm sure, Pirate has a much more structured approach, but for me, this is like a lot of trial and error. It's just getting this stuff to work. So now let's open up the new file. All right, so it copied a lot of the areas from Nexus, which is fine. Even though I didn't technically want that, I should have been clear about that. But like I said, guys, we're trying not to make this overly complicated. You just move the knobs, in a position where they don't get in the way of other knobs. Okay, so again, these placements don't make sense. I'm just dragging these to get out the way. Okay, boom, boom. And the only thing left really is to make these knobs, like I said, look more realistic. So I think there's a way to even turn off the paneling to the right. Again, I forget how to use everything about this plugin. So let's see if I can find my original source files. All right, so I re-downloaded the assets from the purchase, and here there's a VST folder. We're going to go to assets. So they give you contact assets and VST assets as well. So they give you things like, for example, the background, or excuse me, the knob background, the button backgrounds. Here's the actual background where you guys can open this up in Photoshop or use AI to like alter it however you guys want. And here are buttons and the name Neptune. So basically an interface is just a bunch of stacked images that create a full image. And in this info file, they tell you how many frames the sliders are. So when you guys enter the value over here, it tells you how many frames the sprites are. So for example, let's load up the animation stripes. Okay. And here it's hard to tell because it won't open up, but I think we use middle size from what I remember. So again, guys, it's not a tutorial, but let's click where it says delay mix and then go to where it says file strip image. And then we're going to open that file that we just downloaded. All right, so here's the file, or the directory. Let's go to VST. Let's go to assets, animation. Let's go to stripes, and let's go to whatever size knob that we want. In this case, middle is the one I think I used. So let's go to middle, and then we need to put the number of the strips. So let's put 129, which was off that sheet that we just saw. And as we see, the scaling didn't work as intended. So I forget how to do all this, y'all. It's been such a long time. So here I think we have to set the scaling factor. So let's put 2.5, maybe that'll fix it. I think a lot of this has to do with the window as well. So that should fix it from what I remember. All right, now if we turn this image, we should see it turning like a regular knob. So that's how people basically make their interfaces look more professional. Okay, now I'm not saying this interface is the greatest interface in the world because I only just did one prompt. But my point is you can replace these knobs with something that looks more professional and it doesn't have this label over top either. So that's where you would go into your user interface and design around the knob, okay, to let people know what it is and what the value is. Okay, so that is the art of VST design. Let me see if I can quickly make these into knobs. Let's just do this real quick. Boom. All right, so here's our plugin so far. Now, basically nothing's labeled. So what we're gonna have to do is go back to ChatGPT and tell it to label each one of these sections. So right here it says source. This is our delay mix and our reverb. So maybe we'll say like, I don't know, like modulation or something like that, or delay reverb. Over here where it says shaper, these are our delay times, delay left and right. And then under dynamics here, this is the saturation. And then here is our custom chain. So what we're gonna do is go back to ChatGPT and make sure the darker knobs match and they don't just clash like this. So I think what we're gonna do is start a new chat, and we need to give it, let's go to image and just take a screenshot of what our plugin looks like right now and just tell ChatGPT the issue. So basically we're gonna tell ChatGPT the knobs don't match, and then we want it to create a new interface that matches the tone of the knobs, but not to create knobs. So I'll say do not create knobs, redo a modern polished interface, and we'll say background needs to match our charcoal style knobs. And then we need to give it an image so it knows what we're talking about. And then we'll say rename, what was it? I forgot the parameters. So rename source to, and then we got to put quotes, rename source to delay / reverb, and rename, all right, shaper to delay, and then dynamics to saturation. So rename shaper to delay effects, and dynamics. Hopefully it knows all these instructions. Now ChatGPT is really good at text, so that's why we're using ChatGPT. Change dynamics to saturation. So those are all our text changes. So I said, don't create knobs, redo the modern interface, background needs to match, and we'll say, do not add white space behind image, just leave blank, or make 600 by 600 UI. So hopefully my instructions were good. They weren't the greatest, that wasn't the greatest prompt in the history, but let's just see what it creates. All right, so it actually listened to our instruction. The only thing is it gave us a black background, which is not that bad. I think the white background just looked different. So now let's go back to highs. Let's go back to the image layer and then replace it with our new background image. And then boom, we have a pretty decent plugin UI. Now there's more stuff we could do in highs, guys. There's almost too much to explain. We can even add an audio waveform. I think this shows, I forgot how to make this actually show the audio waveform. I don't know why that's not showing here, but stuff like this, we could show the actual waves. I don't know why we're not seeing anything. Okay, that's cool. We could do, there's different floating tiles. Again, I don't remember all this stuff, y'all. Basically, we're just adding a layer over that. Let's see what else we can find here. Let me see. Okay, so the reason the audio wasn't showing was because the processor ID wasn't selected. It was blank. You have to select what audio you want it to show. So in this case, it's just showing the loop. So I'm just, again, this is why I don't design my own UIs anymore, guys. It's a very complex art form. But then the middle part, let's say it's something like this. I know this is tacky as all being, but I'm sure there's a way to actually show this as like a moving interface. But right now it's just showing the playhead move. And now we have a plugin that we can export as a VST, AU. The only thing here is I'm trying to figure out why these knobs aren't moving. So let's figure that out. All right, so from this point, you guys would have to figure out how to actually turn the knobs. That's a whole different thing. So you guys see where, you know, certain pieces of the workflow are easy. Certain pieces of the workflow, you have to go Google it. But we just made a VST in a matter of 20 minutes if I had to really simplify the process. But again, I haven't used highs in a while, so I kind of am rusty at it. But again, if you guys want to learn from the guy who basically taught me, go to audiotechhub.com. He will teach you guys for like pennies. The fact that he'll even show you guys is crazy. Because I'm telling you guys, this is such a gate-kept intelligence that nobody's sharing how to make plugins. Now, there's one more site I want to check out from Ave Mcree. Now, I've never used this before, so let's see if this even works on my computer. It's called Hollow Effects, and it uses a very similar modular approach to creating VSTs. So let's see if that's a simple process. I know as I was installing this thing, it basically got flagged by the detector system. So the fact that they didn't sign the app, but they have a whole app where they like went all the way in, is a little sketchy to me, guys. It's not that complicated to sign apps on Mac. That is a little sketchy, not gonna lie. But it's not that big of a deal. So name your plugin. Okay, so it guides you through the process. So how do we, it says name your plugin, but I can't name my plugin. Okay. And then it says add effects blocks. Then it says open branding. Cool, you control the colors. All right, let's get out of here. Skip out of tour. So it requires a login. Let me log in here. So the system looks very analogous to Electron, for those who know what Electron is. It's basically just a modular system you could use to build stuff. So here it looks just like Patcher, for example, the same nodal approach. Let's go back to the top and it says, okay, it says name the plugin. We're just gonna name it test plugin. Very cool name. All right, so I like how it updates the interface immediately. That's pretty dope. Plugin code, this is for Juice and the DAWs, so let's call it test PL. All right, sidechain input, we don't need that. Output meter, yes. All right, so it seems like it's, I don't know the proper technical terms, it's abstracting the components. And it says upgrade to Pro, so they have a paid version too, it looks like. All right, let me just go through this process to see. So it's not clear if we can get as granular as we did with, for example, FL Studio's Patcher that allowed us to like get micro granular with those parameters, or if these are just pre-built effects with no way to like really make them unique. It doesn't really make that clear with the upsell either. I don't know if, okay, but anyway, let's just keep going. Multi-band EQ in the exported thing. That looks a lot like the Suno EQ. Nah, let's leave that out. That looks tacky. Starter presets. Okay, so let's just grab stuff. Okay, so we want a signal to go into the plugin and we want to first have an input gain. So let's drag this in. All right, so now we're going to drag the audio node from the input to the gain. So this just controls if we want to turn stuff up and down. It's a trim knob, basically. I'm not sure we can rename this. This is very analogous to Electron. It feels like Electron. All right, now from here we have a gain knob. Let's say we're going to move into some kind of tape saturation right after the gain knob. So let's add that as an input. So far, you know, we're just going for harmonics, and then let's add a compressor to tame some of those peaks from the saturation or reshape some of the, now it only gives threshold and ratio. So again, like I said, I don't know if the full version gives us more parameters to work with, but a real compressor has way more than just threshold and ratio. Okay, now what I do like is that it's adding knobs to the UI for us, and it's kind of generating a UI as we're going. That's actually really unique. I've never seen that before in any of the builders. So we have a signal going in, trim knob, into a tape saturation, into compression, which is not, now it says a lock. So I wonder if that lock, oh no, that was just me locking it. I don't know how to unlock it. Okay, never mind. I thought that was like a pro version, but I guess that's just me double clicking on stuff. All right, so gain knob, tape saturation, compression, and then we want to go into maybe like an EQ. All right, so this is just going to be a color machine, and then we're going to have it go to the output. So I can't say it's that complex of a builder just yet. I will say Highs is a little more detailed in how we can approach it, but this will be a little bit more beginner friendly because you don't have to do 1,000 things to get to this point. Okay, it even has, I see half speed. It even has the half speed effect. That's pretty unique. And then the colors, let's give this, I don't know, a red color. Oh, so the UI is changing. That's dope. And let's give it the background like a more creamier. Oh, never mind. Well, that looks cool too. But I meant to do background. So that's the background of the knob. How do we change the background though? I don't know. I don't want to change it. I don't want to mess it up. So, okay. So then we upload a logo. We don't need all that. Sign and notarize. Funny, they didn't even sign and notarize their own Mac app, but they want us to sign and notarize. That is hilarious. This is tested on the DAW, build for distribution. Is that it? Can we even hear audio going through this thing? So I don't know how we like run audio in here. Let me figure this out for a second. One thing that is kind of cool, they have serial gate implementation. The only thing is though, if you guys don't have your own server, that I would just recommend you just avoid creating serial codes because it's such a headache on the back end on managing those. But again, like I said, signing and notarizing is hilarious to me. Now, I would never do this inside of a third-party app ever. Never give away your keys ever. Okay, ever. Never give away your secret API key. So the fact that I don't know if this asks for it, but that's very kind of weird. I would never do that through the third-party app. Yeah. So don't do this portion right here, sign and notarize. Plus it's complicated anyway. I don't think the average person will even know how to do that. And then this is testing your DAW. So let's try this. I doubt this is gonna work, but let's just see what this does. So this is one click installs a plugin into your system plugin folder. Okay, so let's see. You have to buy this just to export the thing. That is so whack. So because we can't even hear it to test it, that is kind of whack to me. So I was a little hyped, but this is kind of whack, not gonna lie. You have to pay to export the VST. I mean, I understand the concept, but like it's like you can't even hear the plugin. So how do we even know what it sounds like? Maybe I'm doing something incorrect, but I don't see a way to add audio in here. So that kind of defeats the whole purpose. But my point is, this is a modular way of making plugins, you guys. And just because something has a nice UI does not mean it's more complex on the back end. That was the gist of this video. But if you guys want to learn from, an actual pro, go to audiotechhub.com. He will teach you guys. Subscribe if you're new. Peace.